Often when I give these talks, people tell me afterwards, Father, you could have just gotten rid of talk 1, 2, and 3. You should have just started with 4. We didn't need any of that other, philosophy and phony baloney stuff. Just give us the nuts and bolts, the meats and potatoes of how to do this and forget the other stuff. I'm here to tell you, in every parish that ignores the definitions, the philosophies, and what I've said previously, just sort of lays a Band-Aid on an open wound. It's sort of like, for those of us who are Monty Python fans, when King Arthur comes to the bridge and the Black Knight is there and he lops off his leg and then his other leg and he says, okay, it's over. And he says, what are you talking about? It's merely a flesh wound. We have to understand that what I've said previously allows us to go into creating a parish health plan. Now, you'll see that I've put up a quote. I love this quote from C.S. Lewis. You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. That's what we're after in creating a parish health plan. It doesn't do us a lot of good to bemoan and wail over where we've been. Let's start where we are and let's move forward. Now, I acknowledge that all of us care deeply about the church and her mission. You wouldn't be here on a Wednesday night at, 8:15 Eastern, if you didn't care deeply about the church and her mission. I know that you are committed and willing to sacrifice to see the message of the gospel reach as many as possible. In fact, I summarize the role of being a Christian this way: to get into heaven and to take as many with me as possible. I think this is so true, because we know that the journey to heaven is made within our communities, whereas the journey to hell is made alone. All right, so let's get into this. Let me start by saying, look, the journey takes patience. Once again, I want to ask you to be patient with yourself and your parish as you set out to bring about greater health. Nothing is going to happen overnight. It's going to take months and years. But as I show in this slide, you cannot ascend a mountain by sitting in your car. I hope to have stimulated all of you and your appetites and engaged you in the journey. And I hope that I've connected you to a process that will have you asking questions and setting out on a new journey. A sense of adventure, if you will, is important in this process. It's also important to realize that I've distilled some fairly large concepts that I've been working with for about 8 years. I've distilled them down, and as a result, I've condensed them and I've oversimplified them. And so it's important for you to realize, you remember the parable of the man building a tower in the gospel, or the man going out to meet an army, and how he assesses first if he has the resources to finish the job. Now, I believe I've got you well stocked with some very actionable and tangible resources, but I haven't given you everything, okay? So more exploration and more learning is needed. All right, so as we get started on this last section, we will turn our attention to the process of creating a parish health plan. And like our previous points, our presentation now cannot be exhaustive. That's not possible. Nor is it possible to do everything I've talked about or what we will now outline all at once or immediately. Think about eating a salami. You can't eat a salami. If you get a big salami, you can't just sit down and chew off the end of it and in one sitting get to the end, but rather one slice at a time. Remember too, no exact formula, no exact list of to-dos, as I pointed out in the first presentation. Although I'm going to give you phases to work through, it is better to understand that we need to operate in our communities with a little bit of technique and artistry. We've said that several times. And several phases of what we're doing will be given to you, and they're cumulative. It's not like you start X, drop it, move to Y, drop Y, go to Z. No, you'll do X, and as you do X, you'll then start Y. As you do Y, you'll start Z. But as you're doing Z, you're improving how you were doing X. and you're improving how you were doing Y, and you're improving how you do Z, and then you go back and you start adding A and B and C, okay? All right, so this is kind of the nuts and bolts of creating a parish health plan. This is the skeleton, the outline, which, as I mentioned at the beginning, a lot of, sort of hardened, maybe sometimes cynical people will say, Father, why didn't you just give us those last slides and forget all the rest? All right, so let's talk through this. There's going to be a total, I think, of 4 phases. And in each phase, not in each phase, but in several of the phases, the first 2 at least, there's several steps. So we're going to start with phase 1, step 1. And I'm going to give you time frames for each of these steps. Sometimes these time frames expand or contract. It depends. So step 1, forming your parish health leadership team. We'll refer to this later as a PHT. We start with the formation of a parish health leadership team. For this team, we invite engaged. Don't invite people you think they'll give you a lot of money, or people that you think are really smart per se. No, you want to invite engaged and key leaders from within the community. That's key. This core group forms the basis of our parish health leadership team. The core includes obviously the clergy, key council members, key ministry leaders, and stakeholders. There it is again. We want to make sure that we have demographic and idea diversity. And we're going to ask people, if they're going to join this, that they sign up for a minimum of 2 years. Now, as you bring people on board, this is probably going to be the role of the parish priest and maybe the parish council president at first. Make sure you guard the door to the bus and the seats. In other words, you want to make sure that the right people are on the bus and in the right seats. Don't just let anyone onto the bus, and don't let them just sit anywhere. Qualifications, again, these should be engaged, active, and knowledgeable parishioners. Phase 1, step 2. Before you do anything, you need to unify the team. This can take 3 to 6 months. Remember, I told you it's about 7 years to see some really powerful impact from what you're doing. So the parish health team should spend some time together, socializing the concepts of parish health. In other words, you should go through the first 3 presentations. During this time, you're bonding and you're gelling as a team. You're learning to trust one another. You're setting guidelines on how you'll work. And we are after congruency. So I highly recommend, and I mentioned this earlier, Khalil, you can get these resources from me and I'll send them out, that we have some expectations set forth at the beginning. So when I work with groups, I make them sign a conversation covenant. This is how we will work. Number 2, we agree to our governance. That's the structure, the decision-making, and implementation of our decisions. And you can incorporate things like Robert's Rules of Order or other such things. 3rd, we develop a cadence chart to our work. How often will we work? Are we going to meet once a week, once a month? And key elements of the team's work. So we discuss and agree to the elements of parish health, because we can't ask of the parish what we are ourselves not willing to do and commit to. Integrity is needed. So we go through the elements of parish health, those 4 things that we talked about before, like personal commitment to Christ and the gospel and so on. We discuss the obstacles and understand them to parish health. We give some discussion to understanding how these obstacles are present in our parish. Again, the conversation covenant will guide these discussions. And we implement ongoing leadership development for the team. We might say, hey, this team needs to bring in some coaching. So we reached out to the university, we reached out to some local businesses, to some organizations like the Puder Fire Department, and we asked their leadership team to come in and do some training for our parish health team. All right, this should take us 3 to 6 months. All right, next. Looks like I skipped to 4, but really it's 3. All right, phase 1, step 3. The parish health team, so there's a typo there. The parish health team outlines their work and develops a timeline. Some people know this as a Gantt chart. This takes about 2 to 3 months. So We don't necessarily start this work until we've done the step before it. You know, we really want to be here for a time in step 2. Then we move to step 3. All right, and again, there's a typo here. So in step 3, basically, we develop our outline, and everything I'm going to share in the following slides is part of our outline and more. You know, some of this is going to be dependent on your own parish. And our timeline, in other words, how long does this timeline go out? It takes us 2 to 3 months to develop it. How long is our timeline? It might be a year, 2 years, 3 years. Will depend on our own internal sense of urgency. You know, for our parish, when we develop this timeline, we set a timeline of 7 years. It'll depend on the cadence we agree to and the level of engagement we have from our parish health leadership team. You know, if you get started and you notice that the members of the team don't show up or they're not that interested, then maybe you've got to get new members, okay? All right, again, we're gonna be off by 1 step as we move forward because I've got a typo in my slide. So step 1, or phase 1, step 4. The parish health team develops a communication plan for the parish. This takes 1 to 2 months. I want you to notice so far, you haven't really done anything in the parish yet. You're just inside the team, right? You've picked the team, you've gelled as a team, you develop your timeline, and then you develop a communication plan for the parish. Trust me, in parish after parish where we skip a step, we end up having to go back, and it's really hard to go back. So try and follow these steps. You know, this plan that we use to explain to the community should be clear and concise. You know, it's going to tell people what we're doing, and the plan of communication should be able to go on to 3/4 of a page. You know, it shouldn't be that complicated, you know. And what we're then going to do as we move forward is provide regular scheduled updates. Just look at that last bullet. You can never over communicate, trust me. And you have to find many different avenues to communicate what you're doing. All right, phase 1, step 5, prepping the soil. This takes 2 to 3 months. To understand what I mean here, I want you to think about walking before you run, or to put it another way, I want you to consider stretching before you walk. And in the church, we do this all the time. We often prepare ourselves to celebrate some great feast. For example, we don't just come to church one day and celebrate Pascha. Instead, we have preparatory periods, Great Lent, that help us get ready and help us to understand and get in the right frame of mind for the feast. You know, what's so funny about Great Lent is we even have a prep period, those 3 weeks prior to Great Lent. So we prepare to celebrate. The same has to be done for introducing a parish health plan. You guys have gone through this 2-night seminar, but no one in your parish really has. And we've condensed what I usually take several days to extrapolate. So the parish health team takes some time to prep and to educate the parishioners for what is coming. And so we simply take the time to explain, which is socializing, what parish health is, right? We tell our parishioners that we're going to be taking and making some very important and positive changes in the coming months and years. If you recall, I did this when I shifted us from a daddy to an empowered engaged model. I started to lay out in a series of talks to our parish what we were going to do. And this communication plan happens on multiple levels. It's corporate and individual. So as we developed our team, you know, it wasn't just me talking to people, it was we went to every ministry. We showed up at every ministry meeting. When I meet with ministry leaders, we go through this again and again, over and over. You cannot over communicate. And we can recall from the famous parable of the kingdom of God, known as the parable of the sower, found in Matthew chapter 13, where Christ talks about preparing or the conditions of soil so that it can receive the implanted message. So, you know, these conditions of soil correspond to the success or failure of the planted seed. And it's true in our parishes. If we don't prep the soil, if we just embark on a parish health plan, but we haven't prepped the soil, it's going to land flat. It's going to hit some people and not the majority. So this means we recognize that successful and to a degree long-term success of our parish health plan will depend on this preparatory work. Now I put 2 to 3 months down. It could be longer, okay? Ultimately, this means that we as a parish health team don't do our work without being thoughtful and prepared and preparing and being thoughtful with the people we're working with. Just like building a house, you can't build it on a faulty foundation. All right. Phase 1, step 6, defining parish health for our community. It's connected to the above step. Now, recently, my family got a puppy. And in the weeks before receiving him, we did lots of research about raising dogs. We read books, we listened to podcasts, and we watched lots of YouTube videos. And one of the things we heard again and again from dog trainers about puppies is that they don't speak English. Now, when you speak to your puppy in English and you tell them to sit or stay or stop, they don't know what that means. They won't even respond to the name that you've agonized over giving them because that sound doesn't mean anything to them. So, all these trainers said, you have to build value and meaning onto the words and phrases so that the people will understand what it means. So the parish health team begins working on defining what parish health is. Just like I've been doing with you in this truncated version of presentations, we spend time socializing and gaining agreement over the elements of parish health. That means that as we ramp up our parish health team and all the steps listed under phase 1, we are taking the time to discuss then with our parish the definitions and the elements of parish health, okay? You should talk to them about what the obstacles are. You should have a conversation about culture and develop leadership. All these things should be shared with your community. All right, phase 2, step 1, strategic planning and the O-ring concept. Having established the meaning of parish health for our communities and ourselves, we move within our leadership team into phase 2, strategic planning. And I put down a time frame of 3 to 8 months. It can be longer. 3 months is a really aggressive time frame, but some people are eager beavers. Now, it's funny how many think that strategic planning is not all that important for our parishes, as if somehow it didn't fit within the confines of being a church. But trust me, it is. In one of the many examples from Scripture we can read, God does have a plan. In Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 and 5, we read, "But when the fullness of the time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, that they might receive adoption as sons." So I want to illustrate the place strategic planning and the rest of what we are talking about has within the life of our parish by telling you a couple stories. So story 1, phase 2, step 1 still. When I was newly ordained almost 20 years ago, I attended my first clergy laity congress. I was particularly excited at that time about the upcoming event for 2 reasons. First, I was the designated host parish and I was involved in the planning. Second, there was a priest coming who had formerly served as an Episcopal priest. And I have to tell you, in our metropolis, it was a first. We had never received an Orthodox priest who had formerly served a different faith community. It was new to us. And I was excited to speak with him. Anyway, the conference had as part of its agenda time for the clergy to meet with the Metropolitan and his staff. At this point, I had not yet met Father Elias, and my opportunity did not come until after the business meeting. Honestly, I was mortified because by the end of that meeting, I thought for sure he'd be making his way back to the Episcopal Church. In that meeting, we spent over 3 hours going over paperwork and minor details related to sacramental forms, total commitment allocations, and the like. I thought to myself, what is this priest who's now entered Orthodoxy going to think about our clergy meeting. Well, after the meeting, I sheepishly went up to him and said, "Hi, Father Elias. What did you think of your first Greek Orthodox Metropolis of Denver meeting? What are your impressions?" His response shocked me. "Well," he said, "Father Evan, this is the best clergy meeting I have ever attended." I was incredulous. Was this man pulling my leg? In response, I said, "Father, are you kidding me? We just spent almost 3 hours talking about forms and budgets and details." "Yes," he said, "but you have to understand how wonderful that is. I've spent the past 30 years defending the divinity of Christ, the centrality of the Eucharist in clergy meetings, and none of that is up for debate in the Orthodox Church." Now, I chose to open this part of my talk with this story because I want to reassure you, as was asked in the Q&A, nothing we are talking about touches upon the deep theological and eternal truths about being Orthodox. Instead, when it comes to the habits of healthy parishes, we are talking about paperwork, forms, budgets, and minor details. But in case you think this isn't important, let me tell you my second story. All right. In 1985, I was a 10th grader at Loveland High School. And on January 28th, 1986, as we started our second semester, the school was brought into the gym for an all-school event. We were there to watch the launch of the Space Shuttle Challenger. If you recall, at 73 seconds, the 25th Space Shuttle mission ended in disaster. Mission Control reported as the shuttle disintegrated, obviously, a major malfunction. After a lengthy and in-depth review, it was determined that a relatively small and inexpensive part was the cause of one of our nation's most costly and deadly space program disasters, the now infamous O-ring. The obvious irony is that the complex, sublime, and elegant design of the space shuttle was wiped out by something as simple as a gasket. So phase 2, step 1. Let me tell you this before we get to the details of the slide. We agree, okay? We agree that the eternal, abiding, and universal truths of the Orthodox Church are salvific, are unchanging, and effective. We should rejoice that the hardest part, if you will, of our job is settled. Like Father Elias said, we should be excited that all we have to talk about is forms. But secondly, we have to face the fact that as the flight controller announced on that fateful day of the Challenger launch, the possibility of a major malfunction is found in the details of how we go about our business. The problem lies on the human side of the equation. If God promises, and he does in Holy Scripture time and again, to send his Holy Spirit to build up his church, to abide with us, if we don't find vibrant, growing, thriving parishes, then the problem is on our side. The take home is that a healthy parish recognizes the inherent beauty and perfection of the church, but at the same time, she realizes the focus has to be not on the theology, but on the structure, and that in this area, we have so much to do. All right, so step 1 of phase 2 is the strategic plan, 3 to 8 months. In this time and very time-consuming exercise, you are going to go about clarifying your identity. Now, if we fail to clarify our identity, parishioners' oars will not go into the water at the same time. Without clarity regarding our identity and our purpose, members of the parish will define the vision and mission on their own terms. So without clarity of identity, what happens? And here's just a partial list. We focus on the wrong things. Remember the life-saving stations? How they initially were built to save lives, but eventually became clubs? People easily forget the main thing. In one survey of parishes in the US, parishioners and priests answered that maintaining and passing on a specific ethnic culture and language was its most important and essential task. Second, without clarity of identity, effort and energy are wasted on unessential tasks. Remember the obstacle of an unbalanced identity when the essential is replaced or overshadowed by the unessential. Let me explain this to you another way. My coach used to tell me this all the time. It's a silly example. He used to say to me, Father Evan, and the leadership of St. Spyridon, how many of you, like he would ask us, have unlimited resources, unlimited time and money? Well, the answer is none of us. So for example, he would tell us, your parish should equate the number of resources to tablespoons. He said, for purposes of a discussion, I would say you have about 10. And that number is fixed because resources are not unlimited. He went on to say, once you use a spoon, it's gone. If that's the case, then you think carefully about how you want to use your 10 spoons. Now, we should also say, without clarity, we will then direct our energy towards goals that are counterproductive and wasteful, even destructive. All right, so let's go on. So, staying in phase 2, step 2, the outline of a strategic plan. Let's outline a very basic strategic planning process for you, okay? There's lots of ways to go about this. I've summarized it. Don't get too hung up on the details, but if you stick with this basic plan, you'll get there. Step 1, and we brought in an outside expert that we paid to help us through our first strategic planning process. And then in subsequent years, we were able to do the review and the updating of our plan on our own. Number 1, we communicate with the parish that we are about to go into a strategic planning process. Step 2, we identify and select the leadership team for the strategic planning process. Now, just so for those of you keeping score at home, you've got a parish health team. We're now saying that we're going to have a leadership team for a strategic health or strategic plan. Sometimes these are the same team. So our parish health team is also doing our strategic plan. But in some parishes that are larger, or in some parishes that have a number of engaged members, you might have a subset of the parish health team that goes about doing the strategic plan. Number 3, we set the ground rules for the work of this strategic planning team. They basically are the same ground rules we set for the parish health team and how they operate. All right, phase 2, step 3. We begin doing our strategic plan by asking the question, where are we now? Now, here are the elements of this step. We take a 360-degree review of the parish and its context. This gets to the question Caitlin asked. An obvious part of this review is examining the 4 main barriers and regaining our sight, remembering our life-saving mission, and realizing what we need to prune, and flipping the funnel. All that was in barriers. And what we're looking at here is how do these barriers, what's showing up in the life of our parish? This is a discussion that leads to identifying ultimately our core values and guiding principles. You're going to come up with a list. What are our core values? What guides us? All right. And in this process, of course, we're going to identify our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities and threats. Okay. In another set of lectures, I go through this in much greater detail. But once again, we can think about the fact that weaknesses and threats will likely come under one of the 4 major obstacles we have defined in our parish health discussion. And you may find that the first goals you set in your strategic plan are focused on eliminating these obstacles. All right, phase 2, step 4. The next question we ask is, where are we going? So if you look before, where are we now? Now, where are we going? In answering this question, we develop the vision and mission statements of the parish. Now, there's some debate as to the definition of what a vision statement is and what a mission statement is. And I will tell you that these words, vision statement, mission statement, are often used interchangeably, okay? But for my purpose, I'm going to use vision one way and mission another. I'm going to say this. In the end, both the vision and mission statements express our core values and guiding principles, both for our parishioners, that means those inside, internally, and the community at large, externally. And they encapsulate our hopes and goals for the future. So let me give you an example. I think, first of all, and for obvious reasons, that the vision statement, the mission statements of our parishes should support the definition we've given for parish health. And I'm going to give you a vision statement that's, in the clouds. It's in a sense almost unattainable, but it's inspiring. So here's a vision statement: an Orthodox community where people find transformation in Jesus Christ. Now, this statement is something the everyday parishioner should be able to repeat. An Orthodox community where people find transformation in Jesus Christ. That happens to be the vision statement of our parish, okay? Now, the mission statement is how we accomplish the vision. So in our parish, we have defined the mission statement this way. We have said, as a church, we are committed to worship that is apostolic, traditional, immersed in music, beauty, and prayer. Service through pastoral care, outreach, fellowship, and philanthropy. Education, providing resources to lead people to a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ. Community, welcoming all people, including those of faith and those exploring. So, the mission is how we accomplish the vision. And we put the vision and mission statement into everything we do. We build congruency so that all people are working towards the same vision by implementing the same mission, okay? All right, phase 2, step 5. The next question we ask is, we put muscles on the first 2 questions. So if the first question was, where are we now? The next question is, where are we going? The third question is, how do we get where we want to go? So we put the muscles on the plan. To answer this, we need to at least develop an organizational chart that defines everyone's roles and responsibilities and reporting lines. We need to develop 3 to 5 long-range strategic goals. These have a 2 to 3 year lifespan. These move you towards your vision and tend to be a bit lofty. I'll give you an example of one. To enhance each person's relationship with Jesus Christ and one another through focused ministries that enrich the internal and external community. So that was one of our first long-range strategic goals. It fit the vision, it built on the mission, but it was rather big. Underneath that long-range strategic goal, you develop a set of SMART goals that support it. So if I've got 3 to 5 long-range strategic goals, I might have as many as 15 SMART goals. That's a lot. We chose to have 3 and 3 for each. So 3 long-range strategic goal, and under each long-range strategic goal, 3 SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, and time-bound. They last about a year. So I'll give you an example. Develop ministry plans and guidelines by the end of March 2020. Plan to include identification of ministries deemed essential to the implementation of the mission of worship, service, education, and community. Leader, proistamenos, head priest and director of ministries. Execution, lead priest and his or her, not his or her, I'm sorry, his designee. All right. Step 3, or phase 3, step 1. So after we've gone through this phase 2, where we're developing our strategic plan, it takes 3 to 8 months, right? and we've outlined it, we've asked the questions, we've put the muscle on the skeleton, we get to implementation. Now you'll notice right here, in terms of time frame, I put annual, forever and ever. You know, a typical strategic plan lasts, you know, and it can be written down in about a page, but it lasts about 3 years. You know, it might last as long as 5, but that's getting pretty long in the tooth. We found that our first strategic plan lasted 2 years, okay? And then we developed a new one and put it in place. We do this now annually, where we look at our strategic plan and we adjust it. So phase 3 is got one step, and that's implementation and review. So the plan must reach into every aspect and level of parish life. So in general, you know, we have lots of conversations with our parishioners, our parish ministry leaders, going over the strategic plan. Monthly, I hold a ministry leader meeting. I've got it tomorrow at 3 o'clock. And I meet with all of the ministry leaders, and then each of them goes through an annual review with me. In those reviews, we talk, how is your ministry meeting the vision and mission of our parish? So we build up and we build down and we build out, side to side, so that everything is working, whether it's the chanting ministry, whether it's our Friends of the Poor, whether it's our youth ministry, whether it's our gifted hands, whether it's our athletic programming, whether it's our social groups like fellowship, right? Or our annual picnic. All of them must meet, right? We don't want our strategic plan to become a doorstop. But everything is pointing back to the vision and the mission. It takes lots of work. It's never ending. And in the end, every parishioner, every ministry is working towards the vision and mission and supporting it. Your parish should review your long-range strategic goals and your SMART goals regularly, and make necessary adjustments. We have a system for that in our parish council meetings. We've in fact revamped our budget to be arranged under worship, service, education, community. So we don't have a budget that's got building, you know, youth. It's all, our budget's all under the mission statement, okay? And we have a red, green, yellow light image for each long-range strategic goal and parish SMART goal. So at each parish council meeting, we give a slide that shows where are we on our long-range strategic goal. Are we yellow, meaning we've got off, you know, planning and we're working. If it's green, it's accomplished. If it's red, no work's been done. And we review that constantly, right? And you just keep doing this annually, monthly, weekly. It's just constantly part of what you do. And again, remember the salami. You're not going to do this tomorrow, but eventually you're going to get to that slice in the big loaf, and you're going to be able to carve it off and eat it. All right, phase 4. I don't want you to lose sight of culture and leadership. Remembering that we just spoke about it in our previous presentation on leadership and culture, an ongoing element, sort of a, right, that's why I called it the umbrella of culture and leadership. We constantly remember that we have to be tending to the development of our leadership and the culture. And this activity is something that our developed leadership takes up. We can't forget, culture eats strategy for lunch. And if we fail to address the development of our leadership core, and if we fail to encourage the active and positive development of the culture by our leaders, we can't move the parish meaningfully towards our goal of greater and greater parish health. Remember, parish health is not an end state. It is a constant process. All right, with that, I've closed out presentation 4, and I'll turn it back to you, Khalil.
Thank you, Father. We have one question so far. If you have any questions, please type them in the box below at the bottom of the screen, and we'll bring them to Father Evan. One question I had, Father, first is how big do you suggest the parish health team to be? How many people on it? And then also, we always have the 80-20 rule where 20% of the people are doing most of the work, or however that kind of goes. Like, do you recommend having like different people, or how much overlap with the people you would choose for your parish health team being involved in other communities as well?
Yeah. Khalil, at first, in communities that are unhealthy, that 20-80 rule is there. As the parish gets healthier, that rule will disintegrate. You will see more people get off the bench and onto the field. Okay. There are reasons, as I explained in our barriers, why talent has left the field, right? But as we get talent onto the field, we're going to reduce that ratio. But when we get started in our parish, we are probably going to have to go and tap on the shoulders of some of our key players who are already contributing in meaningful ways. There's no getting around that, because one of the mistakes you can make in forming that team is getting disengaged and uninformed members on that parish health team. Okay. So we've got to have engaged members. Now, in terms of how big is that group, the parish health team should probably get up around, 9 or 10. But I fully realize in some parishes, that's a tall order. It might only be 3 or 4, and that's okay. There's plenty to do. And that number is not fixed. If you can get 12, 15, you don't want to get too big, because then the group gets too big. It's not nimble enough to make decisions, right? But with the right leadership and cadence chart and structure, you can easily manage a larger group. And Khalil, I'm happy to also pause if you want to give some people to ask questions, but I'll end there. Looks like
Great,
other questions are popular.
Yeah, we got some questions popping in. First one, Father, throughout your presentation, one of the core points seems to be that while the ethnic culture of the church brings many positives, it can also be a barrier. However, I've been informed in the past that we cannot introduce certain music because it is not Eastern Orthodox. Any suggestions?
Right. So this is a great question. It's the type of question that always comes up when I give these presentations. You've drilled down into one of the specifics. You've already gone there. And what I want you to do, Anonymous, is go back up to the higher point. If you establish a vision and mission, if you develop your core values, okay, if you talk about your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats, if you develop an org chart, if you build a developed leadership and attend to your culture, and you examine what barriers exist, then you'll notice, for example, when I gave our mission statement related to worship, I said we defined worship as apostolic, traditional, immersed in music, beauty, and prayer. Okay. So then when you look at the music ministry in our parish, one of the tasks that they had was to build a ministry that was immersive, was beautiful, right? And we didn't get into the discussion of, hey, this music is not the music I know, right? That it's quote unquote not traditional Orthodox music. So that's a small rock. I want you to get first to the big rocks. When you've adopted these concepts and principles, when you've socialized and built congruency, yes, you're going to have resistance. Yes, you're going to have sabotage. But if you've got all the oars in the water, people are going to start to say, as they've said in our own parish, because we changed the music, right? And, most people would say, hey, the last thing you want to do is have a fight with the choir director and the chanter. But once we built vision, mission, core values, socialized, built congruency, got healthy, there was no fight. There's no fight at all. In fact, what I would tell you now is that our choir now can celebrate the liturgy using 4 different musical styles. They literally rotate them. So I hope I'm answering your question, but I think you're going too granular here, anonymous attendee. Get back up into the process. And then when you've built the health and the resources, you can address that specific problem.
Thanks, Father. Next question is from Brendan. He asked if you could send out an example of how your parish budget looks in terms of the layout that you explained.
It's a great question. I get that question a lot. For obvious reasons, our parish doesn't send out its financial statements to non-members, but it's pretty simple. On the consolidated side, it literally lists worship, and then underneath it, it has all the fund accounting listed under what classifies as worship. Under the service side, it lists all of the elements that we are using in funds to address service. And obviously we've listed them in that order because we think worship's first, service is second, education, community. If you show me your budget, you'll tell me what you value, right? So if the second largest line item on our budget is not our service, then we've obviously made a mistake. So once you get yourself arranged around your mission statements, your core values, it's easy to then say, hey, wait a minute, this budget item. I'll give you an example for the Greek Archdiocese. The Department of Outreach and Evangelism in the Greek Archdiocese has a part-time employee. The Department of Greek Education has 5 full-time employees. Is it very hard to figure out what's more important? 5 times more the resources for Greek language and culture than for outreach and evangelism. So show me your budget, you'll show me your values. So what I'm really pushing for here is you don't need to worry about is your budget looking like my budget, but your budget should reflect your values, okay? So just that simple thought will get you moving in a new direction. And it's rather illuminating to see what you value.
Next question is, what if there are parishioners who are ready and willing to embrace everything you've presented to us, but the current leadership is not supportive of and sometimes even hostile towards change?
Yeah, so it's really hard. That's why I gave that slide about systemic change. Here, I'm going to put your bishop on the hot seat. Your bishop has to support, your diocese council has to support this systemic change. Leadership from within is ideal, but if we don't have it, then we have to have leadership from up front. I didn't give the full example of Captain Winters, but Captain Winters had the courage to stand in the line of fire and tell his platoon to get out of the ditch or they would die. They'd be decimated by mortar fire and sniper fire. So he got up out of the ditch and said, look, this is where we need to go. So we need the leadership of our diocese of New England and Worcester to say, guess what? Parish A, priest B, and council C, I hear your objections, but I am telling you, I'm leading from up front, this is where we're going. So put the bit in your mouth and go the direction I'm telling you, okay? That does have to happen sometimes. Now, if the resistance and sabotage is so great, as often is in parishes, our bishop has removed leadership. That's courage, okay? That's integrity. That's being aware of the urgency and the necessity. I mean, how long, I pointed this out yesterday, how long are we going to stand by and watch our parish empty? Okay, in the Greek Archdiocese today, we're doing 25% fewer baptisms than we were 10 years ago. All right, what organization can sustain a 25% decrease? And I also mentioned in the Greek Archdiocese, funerals are up 30%. So we're bringing fewer people in and we're exiting more people. You do the math, right? So if we're going to sit and become intransigent and allow leadership to misunderstand its role, then the system has to be healthy enough to take a stand. And this is where our bishop and our diocese councils come into play, which is what we've implemented in our own metropolis. Wish it was a nicer way to put it.
The next question, Father, comes from Mary. How would you work with a new, smaller mission to utilize the same overarching process?
I appreciate the question, Mary. Usually I get that question in the reverse, like, okay, yeah, this is good for a small mission parish, but this will never work in a big, dinosaur, a legacy parish, the Marble Palace, as we call them in our metropolis. The truth is, these principles are universal. It's like the gospel, whether you're in Russia or America or Central America, the gospel is the gospel, and these concepts are universal. So they work just as well in a small community, and sometimes they work even better because it's easier to get congruency. You've got fewer members to socialize with and build the team. So even if that team's only 2, and if the parish is only 20, if tomorrow my bishop said, Father Evan, you're going to go to the cathedral in Denver, I wouldn't change what I've presented to you. If tomorrow he said to me, you're going to Pocatello, Idaho, and you're starting a brand new parish, I wouldn't change what I told you. I would apply these concepts and principles to the same degree, with the same importance, and just the team would change, probably in size, okay?
And the last question right now we have is, Father Evan, you said the goal is to build a healthy parish, not to make getting more people as the goal. We have many parishioners who have disappeared over the past several years. Does building a healthy parish bring back parishioners, or does it just attract new people looking for a home? Is there a way to incorporate reaching out to people who once were active parishioners but who no longer attend church?
I get this question all the time, and I've got some bad news for you. The apostle mentions it's a terrifying statement. He says it would have been better for those who knew the Lord of glory and turned away from him to not have known him. It's pretty hard to convert someone who thinks they've been converted. It's hard to make a Christian out of someone who thinks they are a Christian but are disfigured. That isn't to say some portion of the nominal or disaffected doesn't come back. Because if we think about the parish in terms of concentric circles, we're constantly trying to move people in the image of the funnel from the fringe into the center. And some of that can happen. But the disaffected, the disengaged, who were formerly part of our parish, are a much harder nut to crack. But I can say that some progress can be made there. More of your growth is going to come from new membership. St. Paul went through this. He went first to whom? Israel. And he banged his head against that wall. And finally, when Israel would not accept the message, he said, fine, I'm going to go to the Gentiles. And he left his brethren. And he said himself, I wish I was accursed for my brethren's sake. He talks about this in Romans. But he warns the new, right? He says in Romans also, be careful, you were grafted in, to this living, abiding Israel. And just as God has grafted you in, he can cut you out. So it's not as if we don't attempt to build bridges to and lower walls towards those disaffected and disengaged parishioners. But it can't be our focus. Just as it can't be our focus to get these new people in either. Our focus is health. We build the health and strength of our community, and God will supply the growth and vitality, right? He'll direct it. So, I categorize it this way. We can talk about converts, we can talk about reverts, and we can talk about retreads. So yes, this plan attracts converts, but it will get some reverts, but it'll also get some retreads, and that's just the way it goes.
Father Evan, I want to thank you for the last 2 nights. They've just been absolutely amazing. I mean, you've left me personally with a lot to think about. It inspired me to get together with some of the people here in Norwood. many of whom I can see have actually been attending on the last 2 nights. So just from those of us in St. George, I want to thank you.
Thank you.
And I can tell from the questions that a lot of people have been really touched by your work in ministry. As we've said a couple times during the course of the last few evenings, these presentations have been recorded. We'll make those available, and as soon as we get the materials, we'll send them out as well. I can see Sadna's picture has reappeared. So, Your Grace, anything to add?
Also, thank you very much, and I'm very pleased and looking forward to more of these kinds of programs quickly.
All right. Well, and I'm going to send out a big thank you to Khalil for all the work he's done putting this together. And it's really been a blessing. So thanks to everyone who's had a part in this, to all of you who have attended. I really do believe it's worthwhile and given us all a lot to think about, and more than just thinking about it, to see if we can put it into action. And once again, to you, Father Evan, thank you so much on behalf of all of us here in New England for everything you've done for us. And, we hope that, maybe 2021 will be a little bit different.
Yeah.
And we could even fly you back to Boston once again and let you meet some of these good folks in person and talk more about this, because it's a really valuable service that you're doing for us. And,
Well, thank you,
God
Father. Thank you, Khalil, Your Grace. My thanks to you for allowing me to be part of your diocese and your prayers, your blessing, and to all who've participated. Thanks so much. I hope to hear from you. Keep in mind, you can call me anytime on Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. The lines are open. I'll be on this Sunday. If you want to bring up a question on Parish Health, I get them all the time. Just call Ancient Faith Radio, 1-855-AF-RADIO, 1-855-237-2346. And if you get a chance, I know, Khalil, you'll probably share the link to that new book, Spiritual Toolkit, which I think is helpful. And please pray. I'm attempting to get all of these presentations through the years into a book form, so that I can share this in a greater way with all of you. So thanks again. Your blessing, your grace, your prayers, and again, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of your diocese.
Thanksgiving we offer unto thee, O Christ, our God, for time together, for Father Evan and his leadership, and for all the parish leaders that God has given us to work within this diocese. God is with us, whose grace and love for mankind, always, now, and ever, and into ages of ages. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. He's blessed us with